Welcome back to Building Better Businesses in ABA with me, Jonathan Mueller. It's a weekly podcast about the forces reshaping our autism services field. Learn from successful entrepreneurs, payers, investors, and leaders in applied behavior analysis. Thank you, kind listener, for letting me into your world today. Now on to the show. My guest today is Dr. Rachel Taylor. Dr. Taylor has supported individuals diagnosed with neurodevelopmental disorders for more than 20 years. She serves as a CASP board member, a member of the Scientific Council for the Organization for Autism Research, and as an advisor to the Cambridge Center for Behavioral Studies. She's the founder and former CEO for the Center for Applied Behavior Analysis, CABA, and is a senior consultant with CABA Consulting. Rachel, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me here.
It is my honor and pleasure to have you. And gosh, I want to know all about your CABA journey. And like maybe most specifically, when was the moment you knew you wanted to start a new ABA organization?
You know, I always imagine like how absurdly, ridiculously wide the range probably is on answers that someone in my role can give to this question, right? And at the same time, I'm thinking we all probably have like a pretty common, consistent theme, which is the moment that I really thought I was going to and totally didn't think I was going to, right? I'm a weird one though. So I have a bit of an odd history in ABA. Let me start by explaining that. I did not launch CABA until I think it was more than a decade after I defended my dissertation in behavior analysis. So right there is a bit of an odd background in that means I had my master's degree and my BCBA for a really long time. And I had floated around in fortunate for me, different amazing positions that crossed from academia through clinical practice and research. And the part of my story and a personal part that's odd is I was nursing my son in my arms at my doctoral defense, no joke, to the point where when the committee goes back in the room and gets to discuss whether or not you're a doctor and they make you wait outside like in the movies, and then they come out and say, when they came out, I had to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to need you to wait because I was still nursing because they'd had me in there for so long. Like, I still remember this, right? I tell this because it was 7 years later that my son was diagnosed, and my husband at the time, which is not his father, was the stay-at-home dad. And oddly enough, he's not a BCBA, and he was the first when I would come home from work and my son had been in sessions to say, I don't think this is what should be going on. Like, they're not seeming to work on the goals that are what we need right now. And hasn't everyone told you to, start an ABA company? So I was first trying to explain to him that, no, you don't go from being the director of research for CARD and being the founding department chair of a PhD program to opening an ABA. But boy, was he right. He kept every day saying, we know how to do this better. And a lot of my former grad students were increasingly getting frustrated at their agencies and feeling like they weren't getting the support they needed. And I think they all trusted that I would bring an academic model to the clinical practice. So a lot of my former students were ready to want to start with us too. So we were in a great position to say, all right, let's go for it. And honestly, a lot of people don't know CABA was supposed to be a social skills group in my small town in California. And that was going to be it. Yeah. We have 4 offices, 3 with physical locations, 250 staff, 27 BCBAs, and 7 different service lines, including 4 community living homes. So it's not what we expected 8 years later, but I know that part of the story sounds very familiar and is ironic because I was focused on the don't grow too big too fast. And in my defense, we turned down like a dozen homes. We turned down several locations, and our locations all open based on a very personal connection of mine, either professionally or academically. That was one was Northern California, same with Central California, and called and said, we'd like CABA to be here, primarily because CABA offers services across ages, which is not as unique now as it was 8 years ago, which I'm excited about because I didn't want to be the only adult provider, but we support children as well.
Well, I have to first reflect on something. So my wife is a lactation consultant. So she is yelling right now, you go girl. She's a passionate advocate.
I forgot about that and I knew that.
I love it. I love it. I love it so much. And yes, defending a dissertation while nursing, high five, sister. That's sick. But, this idea of we know how to do this better, that's such the archetypal, like, entrepreneurial journey. It feels like that to me. But it speaks like the passion and, like, extreme commitment to everything that's gonna to you, like, becoming an entrepreneur and growing an organization, all the challenges you face. That sounds like an amazing seed to the organization, but I'm curious what's been the most challenging part of your CABA journey and that you would not have anticipated going into it?
Before I jump right into that, I'll say, and although I love the women empowerment moment, and now I'm about to say I couldn't have done it without my husband, and that's real. So I want to clarify that. So I was a professor, and I advised a lot of people who own amazing companies. Actually, when we launched the program that I taught in Southern California, it was a model that was designed for full-time working people. So a lot of former students that I had known in a master's program had started successful companies down here. And when the school approached me to ask me to help them start the program, and don't let me forget, I'll get back to the most challenging part, but you made me think of it. And I want to say this part because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and you have the C-suite kind of audience here. And it, at the time, the school said, we want to start this program. Who do you think would want to be in a PhD program? And I said, incredibly well-established agency owners that have a master's degree, and they're not going to want to move to Kalamazoo right now. They're not going to go to Florida right now. So we're going to need to design this as a weekend only model. So I want to say as well that it's not just that my experience across all those positions put me in a better position later in life to be as successful as we were in the last 8 years. It's that I was learning from students that were owning and operating agencies when I was a professor. And I'll be honest, the ones that were successful were the ones that were partnered with people who had formal business training and a bit background. And I think that's what my moment that will go back to saying, yay, go women. And I did it. And at the same time, my husband was in the finance world. My husband was in real estate. And I always said to people, they say, why don't you start your own company? I'm like, the farthest I can go down the finance route, and it's actually very helpful. And I'm about to make this joke. It's a major focus of my work in grad school was behavioral economics. So I can engage in the dialogue, to say the least. And my pre-doc work was at Johns Hopkins or Kennedy Krieger, really, not formal pre-doc, but before I went my PhD program. So the notion of values-based care and the medical model, I've been in that since 1999, so I'm not saying that I didn't have unique things, but if I didn't have my husband who had that viewpoint, we wouldn't have made it. And it's especially now with the massive change in the way finance operates within our world. So I just want to clarify that. On that note, most challenging thing. I don't want to make it a pandemic heavy talk, but it is. And I want to come up with we're in this, 3-year mark, right? So I feel like I need to pivot the conversation because we can all move it now. That's it. Bottom line. Why for us though? And I became a little bit of a semi YouTube, not star in our field. Star means you get 1,000 views, right? A transition to telehealth, we called it, because I was panicked when COVID hit for CABA. And within our field, there was a lot of debate about that which defined an essential worker. It was next level for us because there was no option. There was no, we're going to cancel session. The homes that we operate are through the state of California, the DDS system and the regional center system. These are not private community homes where we can tell the families, sorry, if you want to come visit your individual, you can't bring them back, which is what a lot of community living homes had to move to those policies in that first 3 to 6 months. And there was nowhere. And then a few weeks into it, then the beginnings of the fear of having staff. And at one point I remember thinking, how does this work? Do we call in the National Guard? There's no one but me and my husband and my brother and this 24 couple more than that BCBAs. And anyway, so there's the drama moment for you. I mean, that would be hands down the biggest challenge, the most unexpected, the most terrible, and I still here now, sitting here 3 years later, have no idea how we got through it. And the transition to telehealth was me putting out videos, panicking, just like everyone take a moment and let's make sure that we remember the work we're supposed. And I was actually just talking to our team because we hadn't even really had a strong virtual presence with each other to that point. So that was challenging too. We really built ourselves as a brick and mortar company. I said that earlier. I'm an old school academic girl. If I'm going to have everyone with their advisor, we all need our nice little offices. So that part of going through it. So the YouTube was just because I didn't even know how to share a video. And so I opened it again and suddenly other people started watching it. It's really funny when you go back. but I'm like in my backyard, like talking to the supervisors. Yeah. So I'll flip that and say, I think the best was looking back and being like, and we got through that, and then here we are. Although I still don't know if we're getting through it, but right now I can still say with full confidence that we had no staff furloughs. No one had a decrease in pay. Anyone that was with us the whole time makes more now than they did before. And my husband and I went to minimum wage for, I black out for how long, but so there was tough decisions in that process to stay a family owned and operated company. But my brother had a restaurant background, and actually hospitality, and I should say bigger than restaurants, but the restaurants I think of, he was no joke in like back alleys in downtown LA, calling his old friends to get us PPE. And we were like at the front of the line because we're like convenient. Restaurant staff have gloves. I don't know if it was really like, go call those guys because we're in it. If I come up with a sexier story someday, have me back on and I'll stop being so pandemic focused, but it's still with us every day.
You've struck a nerve because we're recording this episode almost exactly 3 years to the day that the world shut down. And, I don't think I've ever shared this on the pod, but this question of essential worker, I mean, you brought that back so vividly. You know what my experience was, Rachel? We were, just like everyone, we were like, what the heck's going on? Should we even continue services? Should this organization exist? And our decision point became easy when we just asked our families, what do
Mm,
you want? Right.
yeah,
And I think we had 10% of our families decided to take a break. Many of them ended up coming back. All the rest said, we need you more now than ever with the world shut down and schools shut down. So it was a simple decision. So on the one hand, Rachel, like we're hearing this feedback from our families. And on the other hand, there were debates in our field about whether or not we were essential workers. And this felt like a freaking crucible. Are we in medical necessity, right? Like, and it's clear we are medical necessity. And so I don't know, but that was a dichotomy.
but here's where you see where I'm not your typical agency owner. How far are we in? And I'm going to be a total dork. Where did my head go listening to you? I'm like, I wish we had a research protocol in place. Your numbers, that's fascinating. That it's an empirical question, but we weren't in a position to ask. Some of our families, we were, and to be frank, I think that was our protocol across the service lines. That was not initially, but you just blew my mind on the 10%. And why I said I wish there was a research protocol is, and I, knock on wood, I don't want to put this out in the world, but if this happens again, can everyone please do what Jonathan said so we can get numbers on the percentage of families? 'Cause I'm thinking your numbers might not reflect if a lot of other organizations have done this. And again, it's an empirical question, but I would argue that if we were to dig into more questions as to why your family said yes, that was fully representative of it. What a fascinating treatment satisfaction measure you just did, Jonathan. Like in the weirdest conditions, right? Like, it's like if we could do like an analog, it would be really jacked up, right? Like, how do we make the thing as messed up as possible and say, do you still want us? Anyway, sorry. That's amazing. That speaks volumes of the work that you do, I think. So cool. Anyway, yeah, no, it is. It's 3 years to the day. And that for me is super salient because, as many people know, I was the conference chair for the second largest CPA conference in the world, Calaba. And we were on site last week, 3 years ago, and unfortunately had to shut down on site. So, yeah, I'm with you. It brings back a lot of stimulus pairings, as us dorks say.
Well, this whole idea. One of my favorite books is The Messy Middle by Scott Belsky, who talks about how in entrepreneurship, like the beginnings and the ends and transitions are all celebrated. No one celebrates the hard work that happens day to day. And yes, a pandemic is maybe on one end of the spectrum of hard work, but that's a great example of how you are forced constantly as an entrepreneur, as a business owner to evolve your service or product offering and make sure you're listening to your clients and everything that comes with it. But I want to ask you, Rachel, I think it was last year, you deliberately chose to hand over the CEO reins. And it takes extraordinary intention. Tell me more about why you made that decision.
Yeah, and I love your language, Jonathan. I have to say that you just said stood out to me, the extraordinary intention. And, all right, I'll go back to that if it makes sense for me too. If not, then remind me to save it for a total Be Rental to Keep Fest podcast. All right. Because it is a fascinating concept, right? But, the story is multifaceted. So, yes, I stepped down in spring as CEO, and we are officially 8 years. I always forget. So, and interestingly, so that means when COVID hit, we were at that crucial 5-year marker of really where all owned family and operated companies are going to make it or break it. And so it was a couple of different things. We did need to go through a reorg. So as many did, in terms of, as I just mentioned to you, coming out of brick and mortar, getting through transitioning the format of services, et cetera. That list could go on, and keeping an eye on how best to stay sustainable. Let me just bottom line and realizing, all right, some decisions need to be made now that there were certain departments that we had developed when we thought we were going to be primarily on ground. So certain departments we realized weren't functional in the structure that we had now that had really naturally come out of the last 3 years in the processes. And so we dissolved those departments. And as I mentioned earlier, we were thrilled to be in a position to be offering the people who were running those departments a lateral type move so that there was no pay change and it was similar type of work, but it was a title change. So in the process, we decided that the notion of having directors and assistant directors didn't work. And it was really the departments that drove that. We had a training department and we now had that more infused in our work throughout. So it made no sense to have that standalone. We had a systems development department and needless to say, that definitely is now infused throughout everything. We did not need a standalone fancy systems development department. But those two directors were phenomenal and they hadn't even been functioning in those roles for the 2.5 years of the pandemic. So it all made sense. But we knew that that was still going to ruffle feathers, cause some potential discontent, no matter how strategic we were about it, no matter how much intention we had. So I will fully admit, and I said it then, that this is one part of it. So me saying, okay, we're doing this, we're changing people's position. This is part of my investment in this for everyone to see that this just makes sense too. When you look at it functionally and we really analyzed what had been happening, my husband had functionally become the CEO. And so that's a little bit different there too. It does, even if you're not married to the person, I should change that. I'm sure other organizations went through this where regardless of spouse status, that someone else ended up taking on different roles when just had to be at different meetings. I mean, as silly as that sounds like that, it wasn't something you just had to be because you suddenly were facing all these different legal considerations and retention issues and whole new world. So functionally, he had been functioning like that. And I think us coming out of gate and saying, yeah, I love this title. Yeah, it meant a lot to me that I started this organization. But no, I'm not doing that role. And there's someone who could be doing it better. That was part of it. Now, the bigger part of it though is, and I'm so thrilled now to answer this question versus 5 months ago, was because I didn't know if it was going to work. And I had to think it out as I switched to a consultant role. So I didn't just step down and not just, that sounds terrible, but I could have stepped down and said, okay, now I'm your chief clinical officer, or now I'm your people officer or whatever. No, I became a consultant and we made very strategic legal decisions around that. I am the owner. I'm the majority owner still, but because of that fact, we had to make sure that I do not have decision-making power. The interesting part of the story is it took a couple of months and I didn't anticipate it for, I think, some of our team members to believe that. And it could have been better. It was like out of a movie. I'd be in a meeting like sometime in the summer and one of them would be like, well, Rachel, and they would tell me some like massive thing that they would jump right into it. And I was like, whoa, hold on. Because they could tell me anything. I'm the consultant. Team knew that. They can tell me anything. Exec can't, right? But I'm there to support these guys. And my job is to then go back to senior exec and tell them what I think needs to happen. And so this big huge thing would come up and I'd be like, oh, wait, okay, hold on. I have no idea what you're talking about. And well, you don't know this? And I should have anticipated it, right? Because it is my husband and my brother that they wouldn't believe us. But I think there was a moment that I think I got I'll be honest, a little fussy. I had to kind of get past that. So my badly way of telling you, the intention was, am I going to be able to make a bigger contribution to the shenanigans that are continuing to happen by really being not a neutral voice, but a guiding voice, right? A consultant's not neutral, right? But someone who can communicate with the hands-off kind of way here, because ultimately I don't have the ultimate decision. And it worked, I think, amazing across both groups that I hope had the trust and the support of the staff members I worked for with a long time, but it got better. And senior exec as well. Like I even hear other members of senior exec sometimes joking, like, well, I don't know, they're not joking, they're serious. They're like, talk to her consultant about it. And then she's pretty good at that job. My other joke is it's really tough being a consultant for this company because that last CEO totally screwed it up. But I am in, and that's the third part. So one being functionally how it helps the reorg. And I won't say buying, it's more than that, but globally. Two, how it positioned me to help further operations, just straight up effective communication issues. And then third is my own emotionality and stress. Everyone asks me, oh, so you work less now? And I'm happy that if another exec member or management member even overhears that, they'll even jump in and go, nope, she's working more. And I'm like, thank you, because I don't want to be the one who's saying, yeah, but now I can say I'm working more. But it's the whole, working smarter, harder, all of that. It's really though it's the emotional toll of it. I'm less just completely freaked out coming into every conversation. I can take it in better and stand back. And I thought I had that under control, but believe me, when you flip roles and you're really in it on the opposite, you find yourself identifying way more moments that would have gone differently.
Rachel, that's energizing. And I want listeners to take two really critical things away from this. Number one is your selflessness and self awareness as a leader to always put the mission of the organization first. That's clearly what I heard as
No,
part of this is, everything at the end of the day is about your mission and clients and your team members. And it sounds like you were the one to raise your hand to say, yep, this reorg makes sense. But number two, every organization, as you grow, there's this mnemonic out there, like when you double or triple in size, like everything breaks, right? So you're constantly having to re-envision what your organization looks like. And this is especially true in ABA because there's so much need. So many providers are just growing. It's like up and to the right, right? If you were to look at a graph on this. And the ability to say, what does the structure of this organization need to look like in our next leg of the journey to best fulfill our mission? It's just like super powerful. Did that take a while to come to? Is this something that
you
you
know,
all have been talking about, or did it kind of like come to a head and say this feels natural?
Thank you. I appreciate everything. Thank you. And well, a couple of things. The behavior analyst in me has to not push back on your compliment, but acknowledge that I am the owner. So as much as I appreciate the mission first and the selflessness first, but obviously there's a different drive there, right? So I just want to acknowledge that I recognize that. Funny you say this, and I keep meaning to look up the term. I was a consultant when I was a professor. As I mentioned to you earlier, that program, a lot of the students were working for local agencies. And so they would be telling their CEOs, there's this crazy fast talking professor who I think can help X, Y, and Z. And so I had a side consulting gig years ago and went into a lot of companies in California. And one in particular, the story's out there a lot, so I won't tell it again, but it was a large scale company that was a floor agency, and they were transitioning to ABA. A long story, but an amazing process to come into as a consultant. And that owner hired a very traditional chief operating officer, this phenomenal woman. She graduated from Berkeley. I think she'd been with like Guitar Center or something, or maybe House of Blues or something. I mean, just amazing hardcore businesswoman. And I still remember to this day, and this is like 10, 12 years ago, and my job was to come in and I do systems level work. So it's not just on the clinical side, especially because they were changing their clinical structure. So then that required having to change those positions as well, right? So, and the requirements available and the training and everything, but from the system level, and they were growing quickly. That's why I finally stepped away from both academia and helping others, as I realized every organization I went to, I'd be like, I'm doing it, I'm disseminating good work, I'm great. And I think I did, but then I'm like, and I just helped you quadruple in size, like in 2 years, and I didn't mean to. Like I mean, there's pros and cons to that. I'm not anti quick growth, but more often than not, what I saw would the quality go down and frustrations increase, and people feel like they signed on for something that they weren't promised. And I sometimes was the one that they put out there as the show pony to promise it. So it was a little like, hey, this woman came in, and this was my last gig, I guess. And so I learned at this point the story I just mentioned 2 seconds ago. So I wanted to protect that, but I knew we had to move quickly. I could feel the push coming. And I guess I was doing similar work like this. So in a moment, I'll tell you where it came from, I think. But funny you said that, because she came in my office one day and she sat down, and she had started like 6 weeks earlier. She said, do you have a minute? I said, yeah. And she goes, I've been watching you, and we were prepping for a retreat. So I had them get on a cycle. I'm like, you're going to need to do a retreat every 3 to 4 months. I know how much it's going to cost. You got to get all these guys in the room for 2 days at a time. I will build it out. So we did like a mini conference, like for the 2 years of this transition. And we broke down admin and clinical, and we're like, we got it. And that's how we would go. And she called it like dynamics of, you have the people who listen and you're the business person. So there's a term. This was like 12 years ago, and I never looked up the publication, but I remember the word dynamic in there, and she was labeling it like I could kind of hear the entrepreneurial journals or the whatever C-suite journals that I knew nothing about. And all my like JM, not even Java. Okay. The journal experimental analysis is up on my wall as she's talking to me, not even applied, right? Like the full volumes, right? And she's like talking to me and she's like, so there's this whole thing. Cause what most people do is they have a strategic plan. And when problems are popping up, they'll identify them, but then they're going to slate them for, they can't do that until they're Q3 or they're Q. And she's like trying to tell me how amazing it is that I'm coming in and, Jonathan, what am I doing? I'm observing human behavior and identifying the environmental variables that are contributing to what we want or not what we want. And I am, funny enough, I'm almost engaging in like grad school style research labs by the way of putting meeting structures in, by having people come in and identify these are the markers that we've seen this week. And not just we're going through our finance reports and da da da, but performance. So I think I'm not familiar with that. I don't feel like I studied or learned it. I think I'm a trained behavior analyst, and my training is unique in that I am not trained in autism. I mean, I am, that meaning my degree is not in autism. My degree is not in ABA, right? And my PhD is in psychology with an emphasis in behavior analysis. And that means that I have equal training across human and non-human behavior, right? And regardless of the population, including organizational behavior management. So I have to give a shout out to UNR. There are few grad programs that have a very strong track in OBM. So I did learn from amazing people early on, but I had no idea sitting in a class about Abernathy or about whoever, insert OBM leader here, was any different than my FBA class. I mean, I knew we were talking about employee performance in the one class, and I was talking about an individual self-injury. Like, I'm not saying I was missing that, right? But so I think it's that training, and I think you're seeing that merge more and more now. You have, I was just telling you, I had lunch with Melissa Nosek, who's the deputy executive officer, the BACB. And if you're connected with her on LinkedIn, you'll see she's at a conference right now for assessors, I believe, not in behavior analysis, like general assessment. And she also just earned a new HR certificate. And we're talking, and she's like, Rachel, it's like amazing. If you go into these organizations and you listen, they're talking about risk and they're talking about human behavior. They're going to be like, yes, well, it is. I think that's it. It's so, but I think that's where we get ourselves in trouble too, right? It's I know this, it's behavior analysis. So I don't do that either, but I will have no problem acknowledging that my expertise is observing human behavior and environmental conditions and identifying what needs to change. I don't mean to simplify it that much, but that's the foundation of ABA. It's not discrete trial or conducting a preference assessment or getting an authorization. It's understanding why humans think, feel, and behave and act as they do, and under what conditions they're more or less likely to do it. And fortunately, that base knowledge has helped millions and millions of autistic individuals. That's great. It also has helped with quadrillions and billions of drug addicts and totally typical humans and anyone who's behaving, acting, thinking, and feeling.
But I want to come back to something you talked about. You were the founder of the Los Angeles campus of the Chicago School of Psychology, which, as I understand it, is the only PhD program in ABA in Los Angeles. What are you most proud of from that experience?
I am most proud of the fact that I just walked out of the bathroom stall and was washing my hands, and someone yelled out, "That's my most favorite professor." I know that's awkward, but seriously. And that in the moment, someone else in another stall said, "Is Rachel Taylor in here?" Like, it was a really funny. And when that person came out, it's a very famous professor. And I said, "I didn't even talk yet. How did you?" There's a ridiculous number of professors here. How did you know that person was talking? Not that I was the favorite. The way they were, that was my favorite. They did some sentence that made it clear that I'm no longer a professor. And so, yeah, this is where I'll come back to the love of our very small, no longer small. And a bunch of us are saying it's like, we're right in the brink of it now. We're 5, 10 years from now. They're the crew that we all used to know each other are like, who is that? Like, what do I care? And that's fine. Like, not needed to do good work, that we all know each other like we used to. But I will think, though, it's nice to see that follow through in that community, and that's there in academia. I'm seeing that now in autism services, right? That wasn't like that before. It wasn't like everyone from the major places were all hanging out with each other outside of the conference. And even if they were, the people that were there for their research protocols primarily. There wasn't as much of a practitioner focus. So you weren't even really having the opportunity to sit down with another agency and you had the opportunity, but you were going to talk about your research protocols. So anyway, my most proud thing from starting, I didn't launch the whole campus, just the ABA department, was being able to bring the opportunity to the people I mentioned earlier that I know wanted that PhD. And it's so different now. You don't need it, right? Functionally, right? You don't. And I know a lot of professors that'll openly tell their students, you're going to spend another $50,000 and you're going to possibly make just as much money as someone with a master's degree, right? And even our old spiel of the only reason to get the PhD is if you want to be a professor, because you don't even need that anymore in a lot of places that you teach now. You can teach with the master's degree level, but that for me, and actually one of the CABA employees, everyone was laughing at me this weekend. They're like, you're the only agency owner that throws a dinner with 25 employees and you're all cheering that someone just got accepted to a graduate program this fall and they're leaving CABA. You just threw like a whole dinner and a party. I'm like, well, the dinner and the party was for all the employees. I will admit that. They're like, but your speech on like celebrating this person. So it's that academic connection that I think needs to stay in our field. And I'm proud that I was able to contribute to that for people that were working in the field. And I'm proud that now we continue to be able to bridge that gap that can so readily happen where academia goes so far away from practice. And that there's people now that you're going to get your PhD in behavior analysis is just because you want to geek it out for a minute. And now, I mean, and not really, there's other opportunities that. And so as long as you're going to take that next level of geekdom to keep inspiring and helping people, I think it's exactly what our field needs right now. So I worry a bit that we're starting to divide more. And so I hope that we can bring it back together. And I'm proud that I was able to be a part of something that was specifically for people who work full time in the field. And it's still there now this many years later and doing great. So I think they're a little too big though. I'll openly say that. I have no problem saying a lot too big. And that's why I stepped down when they wanted to put the PhD online. A lot of people know my story. I went all out. I was like, no way. And I think I delayed that by my dramatic exit by like a good 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I'm not sure what that did, but it made me feel better at the moment that I'm standing up for what is right. Now that's different though too. Endicott and everything I'm hearing, it's a wonderful program, and they're primarily online. So it's changing. You just got to keep an eye on what's working and not working. I think the programs that are accepting a ton of students at really high rates are going to see problems. And the data are showing that. I'm not a publisher as much anymore, but I'm happy other people are putting it out there and showing the pass rates and talking about these issues. I've never seen as many open faculty positions in my life as I've seen and I'm not looking, just when it comes across my feed, I'm like, this is unprecedented. And so I don't know whose data people are operating off of, that the demand curves are showing the university systems this is needed, but it seems to be evident. So I hope someone will go and publish this soon and show it. So it's going to be interesting.
I was just at APBA. I saw Dr. Jim Carr, CEO of the ACB, who did his presentation. He is always phenomenal. Oh my gosh, I'm enraptured every time he presents. But he identified like the top 10 programs by number of applicants and the pass rates. And I think 2 of the 10 had a passing, like an A, B, C, D, E, F, like a passing score. And it was like a couple of them were in the 30% range. So, like my next question is, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing about master's and PhD programs in ABA, what would that be?
Oh, and I know I was ready for this and I'm not. Why? Because I want my answer to be more appropriate faculty student ratios, meaning smaller. But I just heard, and I don't want to be able to doomsday. Over the weekend, I don't know where this data comes from, but it's a reliable source that told me, actually a former professor of mine that said, so I'll be a little biased and trust there. That mentioned some data that came out that they were surveying faculty members in behavior analysis and listed all the different types of functional behavior assessment and functional analyses that you can do, latency based, blah, blah, blah. Just went through a bunch of different kinds and asked them to rank which ones they were familiar with. These were faculty members. And it was like certain types of SBAs came up that they were saying they weren't familiar with. Right? It would be one thing if you said that you conducted a lot or had experience with. So honestly, I don't know, Tanya. I waved my magical wand. I'd say I guess I'd have to add on after this weekend. Now, I would have said to you to the point, smaller student faculty ratios. And now I'm going to say smaller student faculty ratios with greater oversight, which makes me so scared because I'm not trying to become like a police state. And that does come back to accreditation. That does come back to bridging the gap between the certification and accreditation bodies. And that does come back to a whole bunch of fun politics that have been going on for a very long time. And I have nothing but respect for Dr. Carr. He actually started the UNR Early Childhood Autism Center, which I was the assistant director for when he left. So right there, these old school stories of all the connections. So I know Jim part of my career, and I called Jim as the Cal Abbott Conference chair when the BACB made their decision to no longer have the certification be international, because as the chair, I was then dealing with some potential strife with an upcoming presentation that we had jointly between ABAI and APBA. I said potential strife. I'm not saying anything. And Dr. Carr was phenomenal. So I think what we need is to continue to support our membership organizations and our accrediting and certification bodies, and ensure that the leaders are uh, walking the walk and talking the talk and listening. And Dr. Carr is an amazing example of that. And we are the certificates. We are the ones paying for the accreditation. We are the people that can drive these processes. These are not the big bad police that are on top of us. If it's going wrong, it's our voices as students, professors, owners, practitioners, and certificates to make those changes. So I'm going to go with smaller student faculty ratios and leave it at that because I don't know what oversight should look like. But and that's where we need to start.
Well, you're embarked now, Rachel, on a new venture, Kaba Consulting. You talked a little bit. Um, and I want to highlight one of the things that you are really passionate about is this idea of clinical standards versus professional standards. Tell me more.
I appreciate you asking, Jonathan, because I know I'm always screaming about it, right? Private consulting was something that we had started to think about early on before the pandemic. And right when we thought we were settling down, went to launch again, and a whole other wave of things have come. So as I joke, I'm Kava consulting for Kava right now. But originally, and actually there's an amazing website that we still stand by, but I haven't done I've done a soft launch. But Kava Consulting first came out because it was are you a ABA agency that wants to expand your scope of practice in terms of your settings and across ages? Because that's what CABA's done, and we can come in and help you. And in particular, CABA was the first agency to open ABA-based community living homes in the state of California. So similarly, we were the only one that had an adult day program that was based on ABA. And so we knew as people need to diversify their clients, their funding sources, that we've got pretty much the best track record. So CABA Consulting launched for that purpose. Then over time, we've done a lot of work in what we call the risk-driven approach. Now we call it the RDA. And I won't get too much into that, but if you're interested, any of the links that are available, find me talking about it. Knock on wood, an article coming out pretty soon. And the risk-driven approach is actually based on the last sentence of the intro to the BACB's latest ethical update, which says our job as practitioners, as behavior analytic practitioners, is to always put clients' interests first to maximize desired outcomes and minimize risks. And what we always came back to is that's not just risk to a given procedure, meaning traditional risk benefit analyses. That's included in there. We have to conduct risk benefit analyses. But if you really take the sentence in, maximize desired outcomes and minimize risk, what we started realizing is that's different to say risk to desired outcomes. And we had a bit of a shift that I've noticed over the months that we've been presenting on it more and talking about it more. Again, I kind of just have to lay the seed for people that are hearing it the first time. And I hope you'll just kind of reflect on it and take it in, because we definitely have data now to even demonstrate that over time, the more you start to think about it, you can see how it quickly changes the narrative. It changes the narrative both for case conceptualization, right? So what I just said, it's clients' interest first, and that's a whole other podcast, right? But if you stop and say, are we constantly maximizing desired outcomes and minimizing risk? In other words, is every decision that's being made minimizing risk to desired outcomes? Not just to harm and danger and everything we think of, because that's not the definition of the word risk, by the way. Is it minimizing risk to desired outcomes, which includes the harm and danger. I don't think any of those things are a desired outcome, right? We took that approach and flipped it in terms of how we're supporting our staff. So when I talk about our clinical standards and our professional standards, we used to say clinical and admin and performance. And when you break all those terms down, it gets messy. So we're just going to go clinical case conceptualization clients, performance, staff performance, which includes their case conceptualization, right? That also includes turning their reports on time, meeting their billable requirement, conducting the field supervision hours they're supposed to conduct, having their client files up to date. And our model now, we realize it's wonderful to say, okay, I'm going to embrace the no. Our certifications are set at minimum standards. Our accreditation is set at minimum standards. That's okay. That's their job. Sure. Should we continue to work on trying to increase our standards, improve our requirements? Sure. I was in academia a long time. I can tell you how long it takes to move the needle on those systems. All right. So for now, here we are, and that's their job. Okay. So what's our job as providers, right? Our job as providers, I like to think, is not only to support them to make sure that they're continuing to meet the minimum standards, but that they're exceeding that, but more importantly, that we're reminding our staff, and a lot of them, thank goodness, being my former students, know that I'm not just trying to be a business girl, yeah, right? Those minimum standards are your credential, meaning as your employer, your certification tells you that you need to submit your reports on time. Your certification tells you that you need to complete all these hours. Your certification tells you your client files need to be up to date. The one thing it doesn't tell you is to meet your billable requirement. Okay, let's just put that one to the side and say that's the one thing in your JD that is not part of your certification. So the way we built CAPA was to say, look, we're here to support you to meet those minimum standards. And I'll give you access to people with increased expertise. I will give you a committed meeting at least once a month that has nothing to do with your client. I don't care about your billable, that you're sitting one-on-one with someone and you're doing a performance review and you're looking at all of your responsibilities. And I will make sure you have that there for you. But here's the bottom line. It is your job for your certification to be at that minimum. Now, if you're not, and our entire performance system at CABA is based on this now, and what we do at CABA Consulting when we help other companies, you need to come into that advisor every day. We call him the boss, behavior operations support specialist. Yeah. You need to come into this person that I have here, not to direct you and tell you what to do on an org chart. They're actually called executive advisors at CABA. We even took rid of the senior behavior analyst title because we were like, they're just there to support you. We're maintaining a commitment that we're giving you access to support. It's what you said you wanted. And every other ABA company, we're doing it. You need to come in and say, I didn't meet my minimum this month. Now you need to say, do you feel that you can or cannot next month? And why? Do you feel you're at a high risk, a moderate risk, a low risk? So taking that same notion and embedding it across both the way they approach their case conceptualization and now their own performance has just come in handy for us. But it made me have to realize that we still got to separate it though, right? But we have to have the same foundation. We can't have, here's your clinical job and here's your admin job. It's just the days of showing someone an org chart and they're going to come in and be like, here's my position on an org chart. Here's the person I'm supposed to report to. And I respect this whole model and I totally understand how this one thing I did today has all of these massive, massive implications, or as a behavior analyst would say, interlocking contingencies. Then they're not going to do that. We're going to have to lay it out in a way that they're an integral part of the process. And I think separating out and explaining to them from day one, this is your clinical performance. This is case conceptualization. This is your job that you're certified in. Here are your performance standards. By the way, that's also a lot of part of your certification. And I'm here to help you. But there's only so long I'm going to help you to turn a report in on time. And that's helped us be able to keep clinicians supporting clinicians. Because now I'm not as worried that that clinician is suddenly putting on some other type of clinical hat and wanting to help them through. No, HR, but not harshly. You're not an expert in supporting someone that can't meet the minimum requirements of their job. They might need an accommodation. And for a while, we were definitely seeing the BCBAs, I joke with the ACT people. I'm like, you can't hexaplex all of it. They need to go to HR. Stop. This is not your job. So I hope I didn't take too long on that one, Jonathan.
I think that's a really, it's a refreshing look. I like the idea that, number one, like that reinforcement of certification is a minimum standard or accreditation is a minimum standard. So true. And the idea of incorporating professional standards, like part of your certification is the work that you do to allow your clients to continue getting services. Well, Rachel, what's one thing every ABA business owner should start doing and one thing to stop doing?
I would have never answered this question till today, believe it or not. Because I am such a behavior analyst, obviously that hasn't come through strongly, or I'm like, I don't know. It depends on the variables that have contributed to your performance at that point in time, your history, your current context. Like that's my view on the world. So I have a hard time with these traditional, questions that way. However, I will say now 100%, stop approaching everything with respect to that title that you have, whatever it might be, and start approaching it as if you are a consultant. And that has been the most powerful thing for me. So I don't know if it'll be successful for other people though. So that's where the dork in me still has to come out and say, I'm not sure, depending on your learning history and your context. But for me, it's been world changing.
Wow. Do you think that's a function of sort of being able to take a more dispassionate, I won't say third party, but a dispassionate approach? Or is it mindset change? What is that?
I know, right? Funny you said that because it's not dispassionate. It's simply the function of knowing that I'm not making a decision about whatever's happening right now. I need to go tell other people whether or not I think they should be making that decision. I'll make it that simple.
Mm.
So I guess that's why I want to quickly tell other people if they jump to it, they'll go through that faster than I did. Coming in with that attitude of thinking you're not and that you have to describe this to someone else, it does change a process. There's no doubt. I mean, I was
Yeah.
even playing around with it at one point. I'm like, what if I started doing it with my almost 20-year-old and my 8-year-old, right? Like, I'm not really the mom here. It's not my choice. I'm going to listen. I actually kind of have to with the 20-year-old because he has 4 parents and a girlfriend that he's moving in with. Actually, it's probably timing for me too. Now that thank you for this self-therapeutic moment here, Jonathan, that I'm reflecting.
So, Rachel, I see you on the self therapeutic moment, and I want to raise you on this because you are, congratulations, a newly elected CASP board member. Your term starts later this spring. So, tell me, are you going to approach your CASP board member position from that consultant mindset, from a board member's mindset, or from something else entirely?
And I love you just said that because we didn't say this to each other earlier. I think I might have rubbed one of the board members the wrong way this week. So it just reminded me. So let's end on a funny story. I'll make it quick. My first election I ever ran in was in 2003 or 4. And it was for the International Association for Behavior Analysis Executive Council, the student rep role. And that vote was international. I ran against someone from Ireland, actually. And when I got the position, and when I got on the board, the current president was the department chair of my grad program. And I happened to work for her as well. I wasn't in her lab, but funny enough, at Linda Hayes, I ran the satellite master's programs that Linda Hayes ran for UNR. So that was my admin job with her, essentially. So I was really excited because I was like, I'm going into a 3-year term and the president's my right. I'm the one who had to go get the rental car whatever airport we landed at, regardless if I was going to the meeting, right? Like I was her assistant. And she looked right at me and revisited this conversation with her this weekend. Actually, she looked right at me and she said, congratulations, Rachel. So you have a year now that you're not allowed to say anything. And I'll never forget. And for years I mentored a lot of students to run for that actual election. Antonio Harrison was in my class, Megan Ackland, if there's anyone listening that knows these guys. And we went through the same thing. And I said, I wished at the time she had told me, or the dark behavior analyst would say she had tacted the variables as to why that was a lesson I needed to learn. She didn't. All right. And I give her a hard time for that directly. But me rubbing a board member the wrong way is one of the other board members very excited. I think she was like, okay, this is another fresh blood. I won't say who it is, but you can figure it out if you think about it, if you know it. I love this person to death. And I said to this person, I'm just excited. I'm excited to listen and learn. So to answer your question, my first thing is how am I going to approach it, right? And this one got, I think, a lot joking. We didn't really rub each other the wrong way. And I think this person was joking in their reaction, but it was real. They kind of went, me and you're going to listen, like as if I have so much to contribute right away. I should come out through the gate, right? But it was kind of a really funny moment. I found myself reflecting it over the weekend and I grabbed them like a day later and I said, okay, in my defense, and I told the story quickly and I said, this is an overly trained response in me, but it's a balance. Don't worry, I got your back. Like, I don't know what's wrong. I'm joking. I think it was more of a study. There's nothing going wrong from what I've heard. It's an amazing organization and they work very, very well together. But I tell that story because it's true. And I don't know. I haven't thought through the consultant hat yet. I think that's on me all the time now. But I am an elected voice. I recognize that. So it's a little different, right? But that is kind of the same, right? When you think about it. So I will look at the membership as you elected me and I'm a voice. And my job is to take what you think to my peers. Now, at the same time, yeah, obviously as a board member, you're allowed to have your own opinion and people elected you knowing that you were going to make a contribution based on that. So I think I sent you an email that I sent to, I think less than a dozen, 20 something people. Actually, I didn't do that much. I'll look at the numbers later, but I'm pretty sure I didn't send 20 emails because I was scared if everyone answered me, I wouldn't answer them. So I just picked a few names like people I had seen. And that is what I said. I said, I'm excited to bring my less known skill set to this. Less known, if you follow me in the social media, whatever world or at conferences, which is my listening. And I've been trained to do that a long time. So all the CASP board members do a wonderful job doing that. I know that I listen from a different vantage point, having the mixed history as an agency owner of different sizes and all of that. So that is what I want to bring to the table initially, because I don't know this world. And I have a tendency to reference research articles and people as if everyone I'm talking to is from that. And so I've got to remember, and I'm excited for that. And I thank Lori for, it was 4 years ago. And I just was glancing as I was coming up the escalator at Calaba at the restaurant outside, and I got emotional. I told Dan Unum walked up and had a pickle with him. And sorry for podcast members, I have no idea what we're talking about. I told Dan that Lori came to my panel on running community living homes at Calaba and invited me to speak at the Law Summit 4 months before the pandemic, so fall of 2019, and I had never been. And the Law Summit is not formally connected with CAS, but I tell this story because it was my first time in now 25 years in the field of walking in a room and realizing, oh my gosh, my geek crew is not here. These are all parents and policymakers and business people. These are people making massive decisions involving billions of dollars, and they all really love ABA. And I was a little confused as to why I was there at first. And then it dawned on me, oh, Ryan turned 18. Got it. I got him. It's like, and they all love it and they don't know what it's supposed to look like. And I'm very grateful for that story. I think I was getting a little low, believe it or not, before the pandemic, which is sad to admit it, but and it reminded me that's how I started. I'm the chick who saw a flyer posted on a wall from a powerful mom at my college that said, will you come help my kid with autism? And I had no idea what ABA was, but I knew what autism was. And this sounded like an amazing mother. And then that's where the work happens, So I'm honored to be a part of that side, but and honored to talk to you, man. And it's fun to see you playing around with everybody too. I think it's so funny. I'm going to talk to you like a published Java person. Like, it's Jonathan Mueller. What do you mean? Haven't you read all of his research? Like, I mean, that's how I think. Like, I'm like, oh, that's not research. Got it. Sorry. Thank you, man.
So powerfully said, Rachel. Where can people find you online?
The best thing is honestly to keep going to CABA. I'd love to say it's cabaconsulting.com, but if you go to the Center for Applied Behavior Analysis, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. My Facebook is just I had never seen social media until 6 years ago. I'm still trying to figure it out. So I accept Facebook friend requests. And now apparently my Instagram is even open. So feel free. I don't even know what I'm doing. So I'm myself no matter where I'm at. So any of those, please come. And yeah, and I guess I'd done a soft launch here. The first one I made it sound stronger about. If you're interested in Kava Consulting, please. I guess I'm ready to start, which is odd, but I'm excited to try and help more people. Kava's stabilizing. So if there's anything we did right and can help other people do, that's all I know how to do. So you keep doing this though, man. This is so much fun. And it's fun to see the amazing voices you're bringing. I just make fun that you didn't let me tell my getting punched in the face story like you let Holly tell and Darren and stuff. So thanks a lot.
Well, all right, Rachel. We can incorporate it in here, but are you ready for the hot take questions?
I think so, but I don't even remember anymore, but go for it.
All right, you're on your deathbed. What's the one thing you want to be remembered for?
I have absolutely no idea, and I love it that I don't know. True.
What's your most important self-care practice?
Sleep.
I'm into that. You have a favorite song and or music genre?
I don't. I used to be hardcore punk rock, hardcore gothic. Then I was there. Oh yeah, blue, purple hair, all black most of my life. I did walk down the aisle to Madness by Muse on this last marriage. So there you go. Okay, we did. I'll go with that one.
Rachel, I think I'm going to need to see a picture of the goth Rachel.
They're out there. So you tell me that.
Heck yes. That is awesome. What's one thing you tell your 18-year-old self?
I don't have an answer to this one either. I tell my 18-year-old self that your 18-year-old self, I know it's just, there's nothing I would say differently or say, here's what you got to do. I don't have anything. I don't even know what to tell the 8-year-old I made, So I don't know.
Well, you could only wear one style of footwear. What would it be?
Flip-flops. Yeah, the goth girl lives at the beach now. Let me be clear. Flip-flops. Yeah, that's okay. I did which she went full circle.
Rachel, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on the
Thank
pod.
you.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Hey, kind listener. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, can you do me a favor? Give me a rating on your favorite podcast channel. It helps more values-aligned people like you find the pod. Till next time, peace.
I'm reading an anti-gravity book and I just can't put it down.